What's up, everybody? Renee LOWKEY Geek here. And recently I had a chance to check out a special screening of Beau Is Afraid. It was actually my second time catching the film, and I gotta tell you, it made me appreciate the film so much more. Some things that I missed, during my first viewing, some things that I kind of theorized and kind of got some slight confirmation on, and just enjoying things, knowing how everything played out and then seeing it retold all over again just made me realize how much I really, really appreciate this film. But what made me appreciate it even more so was that I had a chance to see a nice little Q&A with Ari Aster at the screening. Not only did he do a Q&A, but he also introduced the film. He sat down with the audience and watched it along with us, saw our reactions, and then did a nice Q&A, talked about, how he came up with the story, his filmmaking process, casting, all that good stuff. So I'm sharing all that with you right now, so I hope you enjoy it. One thing to note though, what I usually do when I, kind of record these and capture these moments and share them with all of you, I always cut out the audience participation and Q&A sessions. It's just something that sometimes I feel it can be kind of cringy depending on the type of questions that the audience members may ask. However, I will say this time, a lot of the questions were actually really good questions, and Ari had a good time really answering them. But another reason why I also cut them off is because I kind of want to have those moments for us, for those in attendance. So unfortunately, I'm not sharing any of those moments with you. To be quite honest with you, I didn't even record any of them. But you're going to be getting the bulk of the Q&A session. I hope you enjoy it. However, before we get into all that, I promise this is going to be the last time I interrupt it. If you're brand new to this channel and you haven't done so yet, and you want to see more of this type of coverage and more of this type of content, all you have to do is subscribe, hit that like button, hit the notification bell to get notified every time a new video is posted on this channel. If you want Low-Key Geek on the go, check out the Low-Key Geek podcast channel on your podcast platform of choice, where you can find audio versions of what we do here, along with the two main shows, which is Movie Time, which is a movie review podcast with myself and my buddy Blake, and Talking Talk, which is a kind of unconventional pop culture news of the moment type of podcast. So you'll definitely enjoy that if you like content like this. So you can download all of that stuff directly through that channel. Last but not least, if you are in a position to further help support the channel and help the channel grow, help get me to more of these Q&A sessions so that I can share all of those moments with you as well. Definitely check out the affiliates listed in the description of this video. You may find something awesome for yourself or for a loved one, and by participating, you will be helping support this channel at no additional cost to any of you, and for all of that support, I am truly thankful. All right. All that's out of the way, enough of me mumbling and jumbling over here. Let's check out the Ari Aster introduction to Beau Is Afraid and live Q&A afterwards. Enjoy.
Thank you. It sounds like a lot of people went to pee. So maybe I should drag this out until they have a chance to come back. Thank you for being here. How many people have seen this film already? Oh, thanks for coming again. Let's see, what can I say? I'm very proud of this film. It's, for me, it's my favorite of my films, and I'm so happy that it's like there now, like out in the world. What can I say to help people who haven't seen it yet? One thing I wish I said earlier on, not defensively, but just because I think it's useful, is that the film changes a lot, and it changes shape, it changes rhythm, and I think, the best way to watch it is to be open to that. So just go with it. It's very stupid. Yeah, don't try to figure it out. It's stupid. Thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to talking to Michael afterwards. This is kind of the end of the road for the film, at least here for me, and so I'm looking forward to just talking and I hope you guys like the film. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So happy I get to talk to you after that. Is it on? Is it on? Yeah, you can hear it? Yeah. Me too. Well, first of all, thank you for being here, but also thank you for making original, bold, audacious, exciting movie making that no one else is making. And I think that everybody agrees with me here. So thank you so much. I was thinking at the end of the movie, in this incredible last image of this audience just filing out, as we're all sitting here, silently filing out. I feel like another filmmaker might have had the audience ironically applaud him as some kind of final stab at redemption. I love that you don't have them applaud. It's not. Was there ever the thought of that?
No. Of course not. It's it's. It was important that they reflect whatever the audience is that will be watching the film. People don't applaud. It's pretty thankless. for Beau.
Yes, things don't get better for Beau as the movie wears on his shoe. It's just one nightmare after another. This time watching it, I really felt like this was picking up on so many of nightmares that I've had. It really is just kind of a litany of nightmares. Does this how? I want to talk about how the script first developed, but it's such a nightmare film. Did it start with? Did it start from that kernel?
Yeah. Yes, but it really it was I don't know. I guess my humor is pretty nightmarish. I find worst case scenarios funny, and nightmares tend to be just bad things getting worse. And so, where did it start? I mean, it started. Yeah, it started with it started with this guy who, doesn't really deserve what's happening to him, and me finding that funny, and then 3 hours later.
I mean, so it has a Kafka-esque quality, and that's a term that's used often, but it truly does feel like Kafka. But in this kind of manic, I like to call Jewish comedy way, this feels like someone kind of ripped open my head and made it the exact movie that I wanted to see. So thank you. I mean, I know you didn't make it just for me, but I assume there are many people like me. A film like After Hours or a film like A Serious Man. These kind of joke narratives where things just everything you imagine being bad, it's even worse than what you imagine. So it is kind of a subgenre. Were those films that inspired you?
Yeah, well, those are just films I love so much. I was definitely thinking of Kafka, and I was definitely thinking about just wanting to make a film that feels like anxiety. And that ending for me is just sort of the logical conclusion. Like it's just where it just that's where it goes. Goes straight into a wall. And yeah, I don't know. I would say. And I'm always happy to hear anybody call it Jewish because it feels very Jewish to me. Yeah, all the way down to the mother being God. Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about the journey of the script? This was a long gestating personal project? I know that, but when did you first put pen to paper and start writing Beau Is Afraid?
I mean, it started. So the beginning is pretty banal. But I had just gotten out of AFI. I was living in LA. I had to move from my apartment, and I had 2 days before I had to leave, and then I realized, oh, this is a potential location. Those are hard to come by. I don't have any money. So I just thought of I whipped up like a script really quickly to shoot. in one day with friends. And the short is like, it was just an exercise. It's not very good, but in that short there was a scene where the main character, who he's on his way out the door, he's going on a trip, he forgets some floss, leaves the key in the door, grabs the floss and comes back and his keys are gone. And I liked that as the catalyst for an adventure, and it from there it just kind of I don't know, from that I like knew what the world was and I knew what the tone was, and that just stuck with me, and I wrote a version of this over 10 years ago with the same title, very different film, but the same, yeah, but spiritually the same, and the humor was the same. If anything, I think that might have been, it was wackier and probably even funnier, but also, I would say like the sadness was missing. And so anyway, I tried to get that film made, couldn't get it made. Everybody I sent it to like sat me down to say like, look, this is all, good and well, but do you just not want to make a movie? So I wrote other things. Those didn't move either. Then I said, fuck it, maybe I'll just write a horror movie. That moved.
I assume you're talking about Hereditary.
Yeah. Hereditary. And then after Midsommar, I was thinking about what was next. And I wanted to come back to Beau world because it always made me laugh. And it always really felt like me. Like that like this film, I don't know, it just feels like me to me. Whatever that means. So it was just about, let's do this thing that I wanted to go back to it and kind of and quarantine, COVID was happening. I was in quarantine, and it gave me time to kind of swim around in this. And the film was always like designed to be a picaresque, but I think in that time I kind of wanted to like just live in that tradition and think about it and go back to a lot of the books I loved that were doing something like this, like Candide and Don Quixote and Tristram Shandy and then certain writers like Borges and Kafka and the Greeks especially.
There's the sense of, because you brought up the Greeks, the sense of predetermined tragic fate hangs over this whole film. I think that I noticed a lot more watching it the second time, that most of what we see is preordained. There are images that I don't think you can pick up on the first time, that you have on televisions. And I don't want to do it like the Easter egg thing, but I do implore everybody to watch it again if this was your first time, because there's a lot in there that I hadn't noticed. So you're placing things throughout.
Yeah. No, yeah. I saw the film as like a hall of mirrors. And I think, I hope that if you go back to see it again, and it sounds like some people saw it again today, that you see those reflections more, and there's like just those permeations, and there are also all these like, I don't even know if I should say this, but all these possible other stories that I kind of buried in the background. Like, I won't. How much do I say?
Tell us at least one.
I'll say one because nobody's picked up on it, which made me kind of sad. On the cruise ship, in the background of almost every shot, you'll see a man that's like basically looking at the lens or looking at Beau. And that, it tickles me what that could mean, and I know what that means, what it could mean, and what maybe like whether that suggests that a lot of the blame that Beau puts on certain people is maybe like deliberately, or like maybe not. I mean, not like knowingly, but like his brain has displaced. Anyway, that was just something that was making me laugh because I kept putting that guy in the background, and I was just waiting for crew members to come up to me and maybe ask about him, and nobody did.
It's just too subtle. It's too subtle.
It's there. It's there. It sounds like you saw it, or I saw you reacting. But yeah, and just I guess to go back to the picaresque thing one more time, just to say that the shape of the film was I think the thing that was like driving me the most as I was wanting to make this, and I think, I mean, I'm like a little bit too aware of the reception in some ways, but I think it's been like the thing that's been the hardest for some people is the way that the film changes, and the way that the film kind of demands that you go with it. I mean, especially when you get to the play sequence, which for me is when you move all the way into Beau, and that for me is the heart of the film. And even, I mean, I watched it again tonight, and there is like, I mean, there's a perverse like joy that I take in knowing when you're in that play that there's an hour left after this. and it doesn't get better for him. And he doesn't change, which I think is important, because I think that's like an expectation people have. I think I have it. Like I have it when I watch a film. And for me, it was very important that Beau not change. I mean, that's what it's really about. But anyway,
The shape of the film is it's obviously so important, but I love talking and thinking about the shape of the film. I think Tarantino's really, really great with the shape of the film. I think Spielberg's really great with the shape of the film, but often because people expect movies to, move a certain way or do a certain thing, the first time you see something with a different shape, you risk audience rejection of it. I remember I talked with you before. AI is a great example. Everybody I know when we came out said, "Oh, I thought it was over, but then it kept going, so it didn't work." And then everyone I know saw it a second time and said, "Oh, but that's the whole movie. The whole movie exists in the last 20 minutes. It doesn't exist without it." I feel a similar thing is happening with Beau. Like it reaches a certain point, and you might think that it's headed to some conclusion because of what you expect with film, but the movie itself hasn't gotten anywhere close to where it wants to go and where it has to be. So I applaud you for sticking to your guns on that, because I'm sure along the way many people are saying, cut this, do this, but it really goes about as far as it could go.
I did fight for it, yes. It was a long fight. And to A24's credit, they let it be this. And there was a lot on the line. And I'm grateful that it is this. And you know how I feel about AI. I love AI very much. Yeah.
Yes.
Another mother son.
There
odyssey.
are similarities. A son trying to get home to the mother who doesn't want him. Or maybe in this case wants them too much. So, okay, I'm going to go back to what you said about this being written a while ago and then coming back during COVID, because I feel like American movies haven't exactly, we haven't really had that great American movie about COVID yet. And though you wrote this a long time ago, I really feel while watching this, you capture something about the experience of isolation and the feeling that we all have of not wanting to leave the house and having outsized fears, ridiculous, incredible satirical fears, as in the first hour of this movie. I'm just wondering if your perception of that changed from when you first wrote this to when this was finally in production, which was effectively during the pandemic when you first started shooting?
If my perception of
The story of someone within this isolated state. It's the first hour of this movie, in a way, struck me as a viewer as sort of like a COVID allegory, even if you never intended it that way.
Yeah, what's funny is that was the thing that really didn't change at all. The big, changes were really. The cruise ship wasn't there. The final sequence was not here. The final sequence was new. And then the Orphans of the Forest. That there was like a forest section, but there was no play. They weren't a theater troupe. And they were. They were really just like a cult. Of like celebrity assassins or something. It was a different thing. And it felt to me like when I went back to it, rereading it, it was like, okay, this thing feels episodic and it feels like this section, which was for me actually the funniest thing in the script and in the first iteration. This is where this like needs to do something very different. Also, after Midsommar, it's like, all right, enough with the cults already. Even though there is, I think, an element of parody here, where this film almost, I even though I wrote this before I wrote the last two films I made before this, when I returned to this, I saw, like, okay, if I'm going to go back to this, I kind of want to back to some of these themes that maybe feel familiar in some ways. Like I'm gonna stick like dynamite into this thing and I'm gonna like blow it up and have the movie kind of like eat itself in its own head. Anyway, so in some ways I've been saying this film like feels like the end of a certain road, but I realized recently I actually have another movie that's like it just goes right back into this same wormhole. But yeah,
I'm not complaining about that. More, please. Okay, so I want to talk about something about filmmaking, and I maybe these things are hard to talk about, hard to answer, just because it's such a precise thing to talk about. But I know that you're editing for a long time. It's a very long process getting it down to where you want it, and watching it with an audience, it feels it's so gratifying because you get such a response out of people. It feels perfectly fine tuned at just the exact second for every little shock, every little scare, every laugh. Can you talk at all about that process? This first hour, I actually struck me this time as being very Hitchcockian in the way that you have the audience sort of in the palm of your hand, and you're always having them look at the exact right thing, and the eye lines are always kind of in that, what Beau's looking at, we're looking at. When someone looks at Beau, we're looking at Beau. I don't know if this is, basically I'm just praising your filmmaking, but I do wonder if you can all talk about that idea of kind of like they would say, play the audience like a piano. Like, are you constantly thinking about that audience reaction?
Well, you're talking about point of view, which is all it ever is, really. Yeah, no, I agree with what I just said. Well, thank you, and. I don't know what I could say about Hitchcock that would be like, that would be anything new that hasn't been said about him, but he's the best. So I appreciate that. And he is, I think, yeah, God, what do I add about, when I say that everything is point of view, he's the filmmaker that like really found like he kind of coined like a vocabulary that was so like trusty that there's kind of no breaking from it if you're making a certain thing. I don't know. It's very, I mean, all my favorite filmmakers tend to be Hitchcockian. Like I think the Coens are like absolute disciples of Hitchcock um and yeah.
I
So
don't think it's talked about enough. That's kind of why I bring it up. I know that
Yeah.
sounds silly. We all say Hitchcockian. We don't really talk about what that means. We're not just talking about the creation of suspense. We're talking about perspective. We're
Yeah.
talking about the way that we identify with what's happening on the screen. And I feel like
rhythm.
completely, and this movie
Yeah.
has odd rhythms, but you're always in lockstep with what's happening on the screen. I think that's one of the reasons why your films connect with people so much.
Well, thank you. I mean, I I did this. I curated a little program at Lincoln Center, and and one of the films was The Birds. Um, Especially because of what that film does, which is so strange and so perverse. And I mean, that is maybe his most Freudian film, but then I mean, or Marnie, or yeah, I could just keep going. But so it's one of his most Freudian films. But I love that film too because the mother is like the covert star of that film, and the birds, you know, they don't really start attacking until like an hour into the film. Like there are, and they're clearly coming out of the neuroses of all of those characters. But yeah, just I mean, there is a real, I mean, there are certain shots that I think about in the birds, like when she enters the house and it's been kind of battered, and then she enters in profile in kind of a medium wide shot, and then and there's space outside of her on the left, and then she sees these teacups that have been shattered, and the camera pushes in without losing her, and just loses the extra space to the side of her and to the side of the teacup. Or the teacups. I don't know if, but it's just it's a very intuitive thing to do, and there's nothing before that to tell him that it'll work. And think like there's a lot of that in his films that that just burn themselves into your memory because they're very much they feel like they're just totally confident, and they're just feeling based. They like yeah.
To get at some very sick and perverse things, you know, this
Yeah.
was sort of the original. So anyway, we could talk about Hitchcock all night. I want to get back to the movie. I want to talk about casting of this movie. This has one of those casts that when somebody shows up, the audience reacts. You can tell whenever Nathan Lane first shows up, the audience has a response. Patti LuPone. These are really eccentric, interesting choices. So can you talk a little bit about the casting of the film?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean,
Outside of Joaquin, we'll get back to Joaquin.
well, it's a comedy, and it was written as a comedy, and so when you're casting a comedy, a lot of your thinking comes down to who like when this character enters the room, like Roger, who makes me laugh. And it took a while to realize, oh, it's Nathan Lane, but then it was like so clear. And I mean, you know, in the case of Parker Posey, she's just somebody I've always wanted to work with, and I wrote that with her in mind. As far as Patti LuPone is concerned, like I just knew that the appearance of the mother kind of had to function as like a punchline. And there were a few actors that really worked in my head, but she when that occurred to me, that really made me laugh. And there's a video of her on a red carpet somewhere, and I forget what exactly is exchanged, but she's talking about Trump, and then she says something about Trump, and then the reporter says why, and then she like takes the microphone because I fucking hate him. Oh, that's Beau's mom. It was very clear.
For me, it was there's that recording of her stopping the show.
Who do you think you are?
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever heard this. You can find this. Patti LuPone is in the middle of a scene on Broadway. Somebody's phone goes off in the audience. She stops the show. She points at that person, starts screaming at him, and says, "Who do you think you are?" This is why when I heard she was in this movie, it's perfect.
Yeah, and that's what she's doing to Beau.
Stopping the performance.
Yeah, and just railing into him, like, who do you think you are? Yeah, no, it did occur. We hired a casting director who worked in theater. We hired Jim Carnahan, who works at the Roundabout Theater, because I knew early on that I liked the idea of casting theater actors more than film actors, especially because Beau's world is so kind of, it's not real, like none of these people are real, and there's there's sort of a polish to the performances that I wanted, and an eccentricity, and naturalism was not the thing. And stage acting felt right, With Beau, it was very important that be grounded and real, and vulnerable and exposed, and he's our surrogate through this world that is so heightened that kind of the opposite thinking went into casting Beau, and then the world around Beau.
Well, let's talk about Beau. Let's talk about Joaquin Phoenix. It's an extraordinary performance and extraordinarily committed. What was the process of working with him? I assume that the two of you must have had a lot of conversations and your own special sort of relationship before shooting began, because you're so completely connected with him. So how did you create this character with him?
It was really a matter of just reading through the script a lot. We would read over it, and it would often just be about, okay, so what is the behavior? How do these feelings manifest? And it's very hard for me to trace exactly what those conversations. I don't remember what the conversations were, but I remember that we spent a lot of time poring over the script over and over again. It came out a few weeks early before we started shooting. Every day we spent at least 4 hours, I would say, just going through the script, going through it, talking through it, and then, and a lot of time went into the look, what his hair was, what his just what the physicality was, what his clothes were. Yeah.
So can you, and in terms of clothes, how did you happen upon the costumes for Beau? They're very monochromatic, first of all.
Yeah. Blue is his color. And yeah, he's a little boy, and so the clothes were always big, very baggy. But the clothes keep changing, right? At first he's in his clothes, which are kind of like the clothes of a little boy, and then he's given the family pajamas. He's an honorary Stanwyck, that's their last name. And then, he goes to the play, and they dress him up as the hero. And so for me, there's something very perverse about him wearing the clothes of play in that final scene, right? Where because the play is all about what could happen if you could change, and you can't.
I think we should take some questions from the audience. I know I want to make sure to give some people a chance. Maybe right here. Oh, we do not have a mic, correct? We do not have a mic. So just project
the question briefly. Mike.
But yes, 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 exactly.
Hi. Wow. First time, lots to unpack. It was amazing. My question is, when Beau wakes up in the forest after being knocked out from the ankle bracelet, I swear I saw a person wearing a penguin costume in a tree. Did I see that?
Can everybody hear, by the way? Was there anything? Okay.
Quickly repeated.
Yeah, sorry. She just wanted to make sure she didn't see things, that there was a man in a penguin costume
In the tree.
in the tree when he wakes up in the forest.
It is part of the play.